thank you so much for joining me. Hello. How has Nosh Live been so far for you?
It's been good.
Nice. All right. So can you just start off to tell us a little bit about yourself and your kind of background in the food industry?
Yeah. My name's Alex Duong. Started my career at Whole Foods about 7 years ago, mainly working in beer, wine, cheese, and all the unhealthy fun stuff. And then shortly thereafter joined Thrive Market, so I was in part of the founding team at Thrive, mainly working in procurement and supply chain. And then over the last few years, I've been working on brands and working in retail. So built the Goods Mart with Rachel, and now building this brand, really targeting the natural consumer, going after a gap that we see in gluten-free. Gluten-free in the last 5 years has really grown from being first a trend to a diet, and now I would say it's a full-blown lifestyle. And the real gap we see is that gluten-free is either very premium, almond flour, coconut flour, even pistachio flour, or accidental. Accidental we see as potato, corn, and rice. And we were really looking for an alternative to those that still gave people that flavor and the attributes they wanted. And so shortly after I left Thrive, really spent a lot of time baking and found banana flour. So banana flour has a texture that's very similar to gluten when baked, but still tastes incredibly tasty while being gluten-free and matching all these other attributes that we look for.
So how did your experience as a buyer kind of help you develop this line?
So my experience as a buyer, as I said earlier, kind of really broke down like the trends that we saw. Paleo, obviously, vegan, plant-based, clean ingredient panels. All were really highlighted in my time at Thrive and have only become like the kind of the standard and status quo now, as well as really starting to understand how gluten-free as a category has evolved. At first I think there was gluten-free, and then now there's grain-free, which is, I would say, even one step higher than gluten-free. And how do we kind of mix these together to provide a price point and value, flavor, texture, and brand that customers are looking for?
And just to back up a little bit, can you talk a little bit about the development of the product and kind of more deeper into how you kind of came across banana flour and everything like that?
So, as I said, right after I left Thrive, I was baking a lot in my house.
Yeah.
And what I really learned is that like I wanted feedback. And so I was making everything from cookies to brownies to bread. And I quickly learned that like these really heavy, hearty things, in theory, or that are sweet things, people didn't want to eat every day. And that led to me this key insight of like people are willing to try small amounts of salty things because people like salty snacks on the daily, but most people don't want to try really sweet things every day, like decadent brownies or decadent cookies are not something you want to have every single day. And that led to the insight of like, okay, like salty snacks is definitely where I want to go. What category in salty snacks is interesting and kind of still has white space? And chips I thought were too full. Why not crackers? And we looked at crackers more, and quickly we realized, there are some very successful cracker brands in the space, but no one's really done a Cheez-It really, really well. So we decided to go after Cheez-Its.
Sure. And how did you kind of come up with the name of Ancient Provisions?
Ancient Provisions is based on the idea that we wanted to use ingredients that stood the test of time. And, bananas are the #1 produce item in the world, and, arguably the reason why we have food supply chains today. So building that narrative, we realized let's build things off of ingredients that stood the test of time as a platform. And so Ancient Provisions is the name of that platform.
Right. And who do you think is the consumer for this product?
The consumer are millennials, probably between 25 and 35, who are used to eating comfort foods from their childhood, maybe eat Cheez-Its or Goldfish as a child, and feel guilty eating them today and want to kind of experience that same texture and flavor with less guilt as an adult.
And where will we see this product launch and when?
This product will launch in food service, so in corporate offices primarily. So if you work in a tech office anywhere in America, that's who we're targeting. We'll be looking to launch through a service provider that's based in San Francisco, and looking at a few others as well.
So since you have a background in retail, why choose food service to launch into?
So as I said earlier, one of the things that I really want to prove out is driving trial and that people are willing to eat banana flour as an alternative, because there really are no products that are made of banana flour that are in snacking right now. So the easiest way to drive trial, we felt, was in a captive audience in food service, while doing it in a format that people are used to, such as a small bag of crackers.
So you mentioned that what is the size of the product? Are we doing single serve or boxes or what?
We are doing a single serve. It's a 1.25 ounce bag, delivered in a small bag to the customer.
Okay. And why did you choose that size to start?
It's a standard size for crackers. You know, like the established conventional and organic players do the same size. And we felt that it's enough that people felt satisfied, but not full.
And what does the launch kind of look like, and how did you kind of connect with who you're selling it to?
I actually connected with them through my network. So primarily I've worked in the space a little bit too. So really starting to learn more about how food service is really the future of food. In many ways, you know, millennials between 20 to post-college generally don't shop at grocery stores during the key times where there's demos. And so this is a really effective way to reach that audience and prove that, you know, they're interested in your product without going to retail.
And I know that sustainability is a big part of Ancient Provisions, so can you talk a little bit about that and how the product kind of makes use of unwanted waste and things like that?
Yes. So Ancient Provisions is made out of green banana flour. What that means is our farmers harvest bananas on the tree when they're green and process them, blanch them, mill them, dry them into a flour. What that means is there's no waste. They actually get 100% yield from their bananas, unlike the traditional banana supply chain where bananas are sorted and if they're too big, too small, or misshapen. They're oftentimes tossed. Estimates today say that about 20 to 30% of bananas grown worldwide never make it into our supply chain.
Oh, wow. So kind of just as a wider look, what do you think about the sustainability practices of the industry right now? And because I know that we're always hearing about people changing their packaging to be more sustainable and things like that. Where do you think it's going?
I think long term we're really looking at reducing packaging as much as possible. Really thinking more thoughtfully about, you know, what materials we use in our products and how much we ship our products. Because I think logistics is a big part of supply chain that we don't discuss. You know, like no one really knows how many miles their food has traveled. But I think increasingly, basically the only reason why we would even know a little bit about that from a brand side is it gets incurred in cost. But I think to the consumer, we're going to start wondering, like, okay, how far did this food go around the world before it ended up here on my plate? Right.
And what are kind of how difficult is it to improve your sustainability practices as a brand, do you think?
I think improving sustainability is, it's a difficult challenge for a lot of companies because it's something that you have to be very, very thoughtful about and, you know, make that call, right? Like, do you use post-consumer or virgin material to make your package, to make your box? Do you ship in a way that's logistically optimized? Do you move product in a way that's optimized? And it's a never-ending race. I like to think about it as your job is to be not more right, but less wrong, and kind of working towards that goal.
So looking at, I mean, we've only been here for half a day, but what is something that you've taken away from Nosh Live so far, or maybe one of your favorite talks, or?
I think I really like the conversations we've been having about like purpose and focus and listening to customers. So I think we harp all the time about feedback, but I think really understanding that feedback is important, but it's not the Bible, right? It's not 100% true all the time. You have to really learn how to filter through the feedback, because if you only depend on feedback, as we saw with the McDonald's study today, that could end up very poorly.
Right. So how do you kind of know when to go with your gut and when to listen to other people? It's probably a tough thing. There's no one way, but
I think that's an art. It's an art in itself. I think the big piece with feedback is if you do choose to go with your gut in a way where you can go with it as quickly as possible and as cheaply as possible, such that you're not really putting too much investment into the pool.
Right. So what are you looking forward to for the rest of Nosh Live? What are you looking to get out of it, or a talk that you're looking forward to?
I think just really understanding, you know, what other brands are doing. I mean, every brand has its own story, so continuing to hear story from fellow entrepreneurs. No one's got it's not like A to B to C to D. Sometimes it's A to B, and then from B you go to D, and then you come back to C. Just really understanding and hearing the stories to kind of stay motivated. I use this as a way to recharge and understand, like, look, the space is really hard. All of us, regardless of how successful we are, along the way, hit hiccups. And, being transparent and I call it entrepreneur therapy almost, where it's talking to other entrepreneurs and realizing like, look, we're all facing something that's really hard and it's okay.
So what is one of the lessons that you've learned from maybe an entrepreneur that you've connected with at Nosh or just in general?
I think the most interesting thing that I've been told in the last month has been this concept of like earn the right to optimize. Okay. And so it's less about like optimizing, which is what I do in supply chain traditionally, and more about just doing to the point where you have something big enough to optimize, right? Because it doesn't make sense to optimize a $100 business if during that time you were optimizing, you could have gained another $1,000 of business.
Right. Well, thank you so much for sharing all the information about Ancient Provisions. We're really excited to hear more from it in 2020. So thank you so much for joining me.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for watching Nosh. Don't forget to hit subscribe and ding that bell.